Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, September 7th, 2023, and yesterday, or actually this morning, very early on, CNN released their poll with SSRS, a polling institute in which they polled the national numbers between President Joe Biden and hypothetical GOP matchups, ranging from President Donald Trump to Nikki Haley to a multitude of candidates. I mean, we will see Chris Christie, Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott, etc., and they provide us some very interesting numbers that tell us the story of the 2024 election and tell us where the American public presently is when it comes down to who they want to support versus who they actually do. And looking at this CNN poll, there is a lot to unpack here. We could dive in deep into the approval rating, deep into economic issues, healthcare issues, what the government's responsibility is. But what I am most interested in, and I'm sure that many of you are also very interested in, is the number surrounding the presidential election. That is what I have taken away from this, because this is ultimately the most important question that will reach the ballot in 2024. Who do you want to be for president of the United States? And seeing these general election numbers, at face value, you see that President Joe Biden doesn't lead against any of them. In fact, against his former challenger, President Donald Trump, he actually is losing by a point according to CNN. And looking at these numbers, I first immediately will have to say, these are not good numbers for the Democratic Party. But there's a lot that needs to be understood, a lot of nuance that can be added into my statement that I made just there that we will explore throughout the remainder of this video. Now, I'm not here to spin the numbers. If the election was held today, according to this CNN poll, Donald Trump would be president of the United States. But like I said, there's a lot more behind the scenes that's very different than the 2019 and 2020 campaign season, given that Joe Biden does not have a full-fledged campaign, as does Donald Trump, nor as Donald Trump did have in 2019 and 2020. What I mean by that is, I think this is one of the most important things that we always fail to mention when we talk about his stance in the polls, is that right now, the Biden campaign, the HQ in Wilmington, Delaware, has about 10 campaign staffers. 10 campaign staffers is nowhere near the amount that we will see come Election Day 2024. You are talking upwards of hundreds of campaign staffers by the time the campaign is fully fledged out. And the reason why that's so important to note is because the Democratic Party is not fighting for this re-election bid as much as they originally would be. You know, this is something that I think they're a little bit laying low on, and it's important to keep that in mind. However, we can't argue that Joe Biden is in a better position than he was in 2020. There's some interesting statewide results, but the CNN headlines here are that Donald Trump defeats Joe Biden by a singular point nationwide. But I also want to take a look at the rest of the candidates too. I know we've been discussing a lot about how Donald Trump is the very clear 2024 Republican presidential nominee. He is presumptive in more ways than one. Fundraising numbers, endorsements, support, early states, whatever it is, whatever metric you're looking at, there is not a single one that favors anyone else besides the former president. But it's of course always interesting to see how is someone like Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley and Mike Pence, how are these people doing when it comes down to their races? I mean, they are people who have been in the race for quite some time, slightly gaining in terms of national numbers, but we really don't see much conversation about their general election performance. So here we have it. As we go through the list, we will be again working with Joe Biden as the nominee. There really isn't much consideration that he won't be the nominee. We know that it's going to be him. It's not going to be Marianne Williamson. It's not going to be RFK Jr. It's going to be President Joe Biden. So on the GOP side, while still very much secure that Donald Trump will be the nominee, again, always interesting. Ron DeSantis ties with President Joe Biden, actually performing worse than Donald Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy loses to Joe Biden. He's the only candidate on this list who is losing to him nationwide. I thought that was pretty interesting. Nikki Haley in a whopping 6-point victory over Joe Biden. Again, this is the same group of people that would give Donald Trump a 1-point edge, would give Biden a 1-point edge over Ramaswamy, would tie with Ron DeSantis, voting for Nikki Haley by 6 points. I've been saying this for a long time. Nikki Haley is by far the most electable general election candidate for the GOP. The unfortunate reality for her is that she's probably never going to get that chance, at least in 2024, maybe sometime in the future. Mike Pence, a 2-point lead over President Biden. Tim Scott, 2-point lead over President Biden. Chris Christie, surprisingly enough, a 2-point lead over President Biden. But at this point in time, you start to see people dropping because I think less people are confident that these candidates will actually make it towards the end. I think the reason why you start to see more and more undecided voters as you get later down the line in this line of questioning is because people don't really like to respond super passionately about matchups that just simply aren't going to happen. Hypotheticals are never really the best way to indicate how someone's going to vote. For instance, you can look at generic ballot questions. A lot of the times, so many people are undecided, even though by election day and through election day, people already know who they're going to vote for, but they know more on a local level. They don't know these candidates as well. So I would say these numbers, I don't believe, should be Biden 43, Biden 42. I don't think that makes sense. I think right now, the high-level ones I'm looking at, Nikki Haley, right? Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, where there's less undecided voters and more security around the Democratic side, I think that makes sense. I think that really does check out. But like I was saying, there's a lot to explore with this CNN poll, but one that I found to be, as I've been saying multiple times, the most interesting number is Nikki Haley's 6-point victory over President Joe Biden. While I don't think she would be the presidential nominee, I think her chances are less to none at this point in time. I do think she's a good shot at being the VP nominee. She's been very outspoken against the former president, but not in a way that has caused significant repercussion on her end. I think Donald Trump intentionally held out on, disparaging her during the campaign season, largely because he knows there's a possibility that he taps her. He loves loyalty, but he loves winning more. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind as well. A lot of these candidates, while they are going after the president, he recognizes that although he's the front runner, they're doing what they have to do. And Nikki Haley can provide enough of a juxtaposition between herself and President Trump that she adds to his ticket, rather than take away, as some of these other candidates might do. I honestly think Ron DeSantis would not be a good balance to President Donald Trump. I don't think Vivek Ramaswamy would be a good balance to President Donald Trump, but I certainly believe that Nikki Haley would be. So I find it to be particularly reassuring to the points that I've been making. Number one, that Nikki Haley is winning by 6 points against Joe Biden, but also just that particular point of interest, because it is the only Republican victory that is outside the margin of error. I think that's something to keep in mind as well. And looking at our 2024 matchup between President Trump and President Biden, the likeliest rematch we are going to see in 2024, it has fluctuated back and forth. For a few months, Donald Trump led Joe Biden pretty consistently from April through May through June, then the early parts of July, and then Joe Biden reclaimed the lead. Not by a super large amount, but he certainly did, build back up his numbers to being over former President Trump. I think it's just interesting, though, to see how much this has gone back and forth between each other, because back in 2020, it was never like that. Not for a single point in time did Donald Trump ever lead Joe Biden nationwide, and now he is. I think this is a testament, number one, to the lack of enthusiasm around this race. I think the reason why neither of these candidates are polling above 45% is because that chunk, that 10% of the nation, probably doesn't even want to decide between the two candidates. Back in 2020, it was about getting Donald Trump out. Now I don't know what the Democratic strategy is going to be. I do believe 2024 will be a close race, but not everybody does. I think looking at these numbers, especially the ones from well-respected polling firms like SSRS with CNN, like the Wall Street Journal, like the Morning Consult, like all of the ones we have seen here, with the exception of very few, they're legitimate. They're reputable. They're accurate. And seeing that they are so close, seeing Donald Trump up by 1, Biden up by 3, a tie, I'm understanding fully that this race would be close if the election was held today. But there's one caveat here. Two caveats. Number one, the Republican Party did well in 2022 in the generic congressional vote, and it translated to a very narrow House majority. Why is this relevant? Republicans won the popular vote. Doesn't that mean everything? Well, not necessarily. You see, here's the problem. Looking at the governor's races, Democrats won in practically every single important one. In Arizona, in Kansas, in Maine, in Michigan, in New Mexico. Seeing these states, Oregon, Pennsylvania, some very big states, Wisconsin, right? And Republicans, to be fair, won in Texas, but that was expected. They won in Nevada, which was slightly unexpected, but predicted by the pundits by the end of the campaign season. This was the only major victory for the GOP. Georgia was practically a lost cause from the beginning, and we knew that going into the campaign season. But it didn't just end in the governor's races. In many competitive states, again, with the national environment being Republican +3, Arizona went to the left by 5 points. Pennsylvania voted blue by 5 points. Georgia voted blue by 2 points. Nevada voted blue by a point. Colorado voted blue by 15 points. New Hampshire voted blue by 10 points. Why is this relevant? These states voted completely against what you might expect if I was to tell you a year ago before the midterm elections, the Republicans won the popular vote by 3 percentage points. Why? Because in 2020, Joe Biden won the popular vote by 4.5% and was 44,000 votes away from the states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona flipping blue, or Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin flipping red from losing the presidency to 2 years later, Democrats seeing an 8.7-point national swing and yet somehow doing better in nearly every single swing state. That matters. That's important, because it shows that the national numbers might not be as favorable for Democrats as they were historically. For instance, in 2020, Democrats won the same House majority that Republicans won, but won the popular vote by 3 points. In a 6-point swing, only 10 seats changed. 10 seats changed. In 2010, Democrats lost 63 seats, for reference. And you see here that such a significant change happened. In 2018, the national top-line vote, Democrats won by 8.4%. Well, guess what states were bluer in 2022 than they were in 2018? Arizona, Pennsylvania, right? Look, or 2016 even, right? You see where they are. Republicans won the popular vote by 1 then, and yet somehow in a better year, Democrats did better. Georgia was Republican plus 13 at that point. So I look all around. I look at the swing states, Senate, governorship. I look at the House seats, swing districts, and I find that although the top line numbers certainly does matter, it does not matter to the extent that we think it does. It does not dictate everything as we otherwise might have thought. We see that with Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016. We see that with Democrats' victory in 2022. It can go both ways, and I don't know how to read it alone. I think that taking these numbers at face value, sure, bad news for Democrats. But generally speaking, it's not the worst. And I think looking at this CNN poll, I also recognize the sheer number of undecided voters that I don't imagine will be splitting immediately for former President Trump as much as they did in 2020. The reason being, Donald Trump has a very loyal base. This time around, I think there is that argument that has been made by the right wing that wasn't successfully landing in GOP primaries until now, that everyone is out to get Trump, right? Why is he doing better amongst the GOP base now than he did in 2016? Because that argument, what he has been saying, they're going to indict me, then he was indicted. They're going to go after me, well, they are going after him, right? And whether these charges are fair or not, the Democratic Party looks bad to the GOP, and it looks like they are intentionally trying to take out President Trump. And that's something that actually helps him, really well in the GOP primary. So I think that looking at where we are nationally, these CNN numbers are a warning sign for Democrats, but I don't think it's the end of the world. Looking at the 2020 election, looking at the 2022 elections, Democrats still have a very viable shot. The national top-line numbers are not everything. And I've been saying this, and I'm not just speculating. The numbers in swing states, Joe Biden is actually doing better than he is nationwide. For instance, in New Hampshire, Emerson College, a very accurate pollster, just released a number that shows Biden up by 7 points. Taking a look at Pennsylvania, we can see here that Franklin Marshall College, they released a new number that shows Biden up by 2. They were pretty accurate back in 2022. In fact, underestimated Democratic support. In Wisconsin, we have here numerous polls, not one, that shows Donald Trump winning in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, all around, some pretty good numbers for Democrats in these states. Now, in Michigan, a most recent poll shows Biden up by a point. The Emerson College one shows Donald Trump up by 2 points in the four-way race, Biden up by a point in the overall race. But generally speaking, these numbers are not as bad as they should be. And in fact, in some states, Democrats are outperforming where they are nationally. That, for one, is shocking. But number two, goes to show that we can't take these national numbers and apply them to everything. That is the lesson I learned in 2022 when I looked at this generic ballot and said, look at this. Not a single pollster said that Democrats are going to win except for NBC News and the Morning Consult. Everywhere else had Republicans up by 2.5, and guess what? The polls were right. But they weren't right in predicting the down ballot results. Again, in a Republican plus 3 environment, given the swing from 2020, given the swing from 2018, you're talking an 11-point swing, Democrats somehow did better in many, many states. Many swing states that were crucial to President Biden's victory back in 2020. I look at this and say, Democrats still have a shot. Even if the polls were 1 point apart on election day, it would be certainly very alarming. It would be shocking, I think, later down the line. But I don't think we would be able to count out the Democratic Party just yet. Yes, the national numbers do lean towards Democrats, but I don't exactly buy into this narrative that it's a lost cause for President Biden, that he's at such a low point. Even the pundits seem to say that Joe Biden is in a pretty good position right now. And I trust them. I trust them because they know what they're doing to some extent. I do recognize that pollsters, the punditry can be wrong. That's the point of this channel. That's the point of us discussing it and diving deeper into the line, right? Figuring out how's Wisconsin going to go? How's Pennsylvania going to go? How's Michigan going to go? How's Arizona, Georgia, etc. Those states matter. What happens matters. And we will see how they fluctuate in and out of time. But on the general overview, I look at these numbers and say, yes, they aren't good for President Biden from CNN's numbers. Nikki Haley very clearly is the best GOP nominee. But at the end of the day, what we have found here is different than what we have found in many swing states. And I would honestly keep that in mind the next time you look at the national numbers between President Biden and any other hypothetical between any of the GOP candidates. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist from my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.